Angle of attack, 45 degrees. Wind resistance, negligible within the enclosed space of Gym Gamma. Weight distribution, shifting to the left heel. Target's center of gravity, currently in flux, leaning forward. Countermeasure, duck, pivot, channel 8% of one for all into the right leg, execute a sweep. Izuku Midoriya's mind was a supercomputer running on overdrive. Synapses fired in rapid succession, painting the world in a matrix of vectors, probabilities, and tactical blueprints. Every breath he took was measured, every twitch of a muscle was calculated. He had to calculate it. If he didn't, the power resting within his marrow would shatter him like glass. Now! Izuku commanded himself. Emerald lightning crackled to life around his frame, the crimson lines of One for All, full cowling illuminating his skin. He surged forward, his red boots tearing a gouge into the concrete floor of the training gym. The air howled as he displaced it, closing the distance between himself and his opponent in a fraction of a second. Standing across from him, entirely unbothered by the incoming tempest of green energy, was Mirio Togata. The blonde third year stood with his hands raised in a loose, relaxed guard. He was smiling. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was the radiant, encouraging grin of Lemillion. Izuku executed his mental blueprint flawlessly. He dipped his shoulder, feinting a high right hook, before dropping his weight entirely. The kinetic energy pulled into his right leg as he swept it in a low, vicious arc aimed at Mirio's ankles. It was a perfect maneuver, optimized for speed, precision, and raw power. Yet, it struck nothing but air. Before Izuku's leg had even begun its sweep, Mirio had already hopped lightly into the air, completely avoiding the strike. He read it. Izuku's mind screamed, immediately rebooting to formulate a new plan. Readjust. Upward trajectory. Shift the power to the arms. Too slow, Midoriya. Mirio's voice boomed cheerfully from above. Izuku pushed off his hands, launching himself upward to meet Mirio in midair. He pulled back his right arm, calculating the exact moment to unleash a 5% smash that would catch the older student before he could activate his permeation quirk. Wait for the blink. Wait for the exact millisecond he turned solid to breathe or strike. Mirio didn't turn solid. Instead, as Izuku's fist sailed toward his chest, the blonde senior simply phased through the attack. Izuku's arm passed harmlessly through Mirio's torso, throwing his carefully calculated momentum entirely off balance. Izuku's eyes widened. I overcommit. My center of gravity is too far forward. If I try to brake using my left leg, I'll hyperextend the knee. I need to roll. Blinder touch eyeball crush. Mirio yelled. Izuku flinched, instinctively shutting his eyes and raising his guard to protect his face from the infamous, albeit entirely fake, ultimate move. It was a feint. Izuku knew it was a feint. Night Eye had warned him about it. He had it written in his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14, page 32. But knowing it was a feint and stopping his body from reacting to it were two entirely different things. In the split second it took for Izuku's brain to realize the attack to his eyes wasn't coming, a very real, very solid fist buried itself deep into his solar plexus. The air rushed out of Izuku's lungs in a violent whoosh. The emerald lightning surrounding him sputtered and died instantly. His vision swam with white stars as the sheer blunt force trauma of Mirio's punch reverberated through his organs. Izuku folded in half, gravity taking hold, and he plummeted toward the concrete floor, crashing heavily onto his back. He lay there, gasping for breath, staring up at the vaulted ceiling of Gym Gamma. The cold reality of his defeat settled over him like a heavy blanket. Match. Shota Aizawa's drawl echoed across the gymnasium. A sharp buzzer rang out, signaling the end of the sparring session. From the sidelines, the rest of Class 1A murmured amongst themselves. Man, Togata is just on another level entirely, Kirishima muttered, crossing his arms. Midoriya was moving so fast I could barely track him, but Togata just wasn't there. It's not just speed, Bakugo scoffed, his crimson eyes narrowed in intense scrutiny as he glared at Izuku's prone form. The nerd is telegraphing his moves. He's loud, not his mouth, his whole damn body is screaming what he's gonna do before he does it. Mirio landed softly on the ground, instantly dropping his fighting stance. He jogged over to where Izuku was slowly sitting up, clutching his stomach. Whoops. Sorry, Midoriya. I think I put a little too much mustard on that one. You alright? Mirio offered a large, calloused hand. Izuku took it, allowing himself to be hoisted to his feet. He offered a weak, apologetic smile. I'm fine, Togata-senpai. It was a good hit. I left myself completely open. You did, a low voice chimed in. Aizawa walked onto the sparring mat, his capture weapon draped loosely around his neck. Beside him walked Toshinori Yagi, All Might, in his deflated, skeletal form, wearing a slightly oversized yellow suit. Both mentors wore matching expressions of critical concern. Midoriya, Aizawa began, his dark eyes locking onto his student. Explain to me why you lost that exchange. Izuku immediately stiffened, his mind dropping into analytical mode. Well, sensei, my initial attack strategy relied on a feint to force Togata-senpai into a defensive posture. When he predicted the low sweep, I attempted to intercept him in midair. But because I miscalculated the timing of his permeation, I overextended my center of gravity. When he used his verbal feint, my autonomic nervous system triggered a flinch response, which created a 0.4-second delay in my guard recovery, leaving my midsection exposed. Izuku delivered the rapid-fire assessment without pausing for breath, expecting Aizawa to nod in agreement with his tactical breakdown. Instead, Aizawa sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Taishinori offered a sympathetic, albeit weary smile. Young Midoriya, that right there is exactly why you lost. Izuku blinked, confused. Because I flinched? No, Aizawa interrupted harshly. Because you are thinking entirely too much. Izuku's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. You just gave me a diagnostic report of a fight that lasted less than 10 seconds, Aizawa continued, pacing a slow circle around the green-haired boy. You are fighting with a clipboard in your hand, Midoriya. You are analyzing the wind, the angle, the muscle twitches of your opponent, your own power output, and the structural integrity of your bones all at the same time. But I have to, Izuku protested softly, glancing down at his scarred hands. The jagged, pale lines were a permanent reminder of what happened when he didn't calculate his power. If I don't control one for all consciously, if I don't calculate the percentage exactly, I'll destroy my body. I have to think about it. There is a difference between control and paralysis, Toshinori interjected gently, stepping forward. Izuku, my boy, when I fought, I didn't calculate angles. I didn't measure the exact percentage of power in my arms. I saw someone who needed saving, and my body simply moved. Yes, your situation is different. You had to learn to regulate a power you were not born with. But you have reached a plateau. Your conscious mind is now acting as a bottleneck for your physical potential. Mirio nodded in agreement, crossing his arms. Sir Nightai used to tell me something similar when I was trying to master foresight. He said that if I wait for my brain to process what my eyes are seeing, I'm already a step behind. When I fight you, Midoriya, I don't even really need to use foresight to predict your next move. Izuku felt a cold spike of inadequacy pierce his chest. You don't? No, Mirio said kindly, though the words stung. Before you throw a punch, I can see your eyes dart to my shoulder. I can see your jaw clench as you calculate the risk. I can see the slight pause in your breathing as you decide which percentage of your quirk to use. You're incredibly fast, Midoriya. But your thoughts are holding you back. Your brain sends the command, travels down your nervous system, and then your body acts. That delay, it's fatal. Aizawa stopped pacing and faced Izuku head-on. In a controlled sparring match, you get a bruise on your stomach. Out there on the streets against a villain who moves purely on bloodlust and instinct, that delay will cost you your life, or the life of a civilian. You need to stop commanding your body like a pilot flying a drone, and start inhabiting it. The words hung heavy in the air of Gym Gamma. Izuku looked down at the concrete floor, his fists clenching at his sides. He knew they were right. He felt it every time he fought. The stutter step, the hesitation. The endless, exhausting dialogue running through his head. What if I hurt them too much? What if I break my arm? What if I miss? What if? Class dismissed, Aizawa announced loudly to the rest of the room. Hit the showers. Midoriya, I want a 5,000-word essay on the concept of mushin, no mind, by Monday. Maybe researching how martial artists stop thinking will help you figure out how to do it yourself. Yes, sensei, Izuku replied quietly, bowing at the waist. The sun was beginning its descent over Muzurifu, painting the sky in vibrant strokes of bruised purple and fiery orange. The oppressive heat of the late afternoon was giving way to a cool, tentative evening breeze. The streets were bustling with commuters heading home, students loitering outside convenience stores, and the distant, ever-present wail of police sirens. Izuku walked through the commercial district, his yellow backpack slung over one shoulder, his head hung low. He had his trusty notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 15, open in his hands. His pencil hovered over the paper, shaking slightly. He was trying to write down Aizawa's advice. He was trying to formulate a step-by-step plan on how to stop thinking. The irony was not lost on him. He was overthinking the process of not overthinking. Step 1, clear mind. Step 2, allow autonomic nervous system to take over. Step 3, keep full cowling at 8% subconsciously. Izuku scowled, dragging his pencil aggressively across the page, striking out the words in a dark, jagged blur. It was stupid. It didn't make sense. How am I supposed to just move? He muttered aloud to himself, his voice lost in the hum of the city crowd. If I don't actively keep full cowling in check, it spikes. If it spikes, I break my legs. If I don't think about where the villain is moving, I swing blind. All Might was a natural. He was a prodigy. I'm not. I'm just a quirkless kid who got lucky. I have to work 10 times harder just to keep up, and now they're telling me my hard work is the problem? A wave of profound exhaustion washed over him. It wasn't the physical fatigue of the sparring match. It was the mental toll of carrying the weight of the greatest quirk in the world, and feeling entirely unsuited for it. The ghosts of the past wielders felt heavy on his shoulders today. He was supposed to be the 9th. The culmination of their power. And he had just been folded in half by a schoolboy because he took too long to think about moving his left foot. Lost in his dark spiral of self-doubt, Izuku wasn't paying attention to where he was walking. He was drifting dangerously close to the center of the wide sidewalk, his eyes glued to his ruined notebook page. Suddenly, a loud, ecstatic gasp broke through the ambient noise of the street. Oh my word! What is this heavenly aroma? It smells like a choir of angels singing on a cloud of spun sugar. Izuku barely had time to look up. He collided hard with what felt like a solid oak tree, though it was wrapped in incredibly soft, silken fabric. Oof! Izuku grunted, stumbling backward and dropping his notebook. He scrambled to catch his balance, his heart leaping into his throat. I am so sorry! I wasn't looking where I was going, I was completely distracted and... Izuku cut his own apology short, as he finally looked at the person he had bumped into. Standing before him was, without a doubt, the strangest individual Izuku had ever seen, and in a society where people had literal cement blocks for heads, that was saying something. The man was absurdly tall, towering over Izuku. He had skin the color of a pale, serene winter sky, a flawless, iridescent blue. His hair was a stark, brilliant white, styled into a thick column that defied gravity entirely, standing straight up. He wore a deep maroon tunic with ornate, geometric patterns, layered with an immaculate white sash. Around his neck floated a ring of pale blue light, hovering effortlessly like a celestial halo. In his right hand, he held a long staff topped with a floating black orb. But the most striking thing about the stranger was his demeanor. Despite Izuku, a densely muscled teenager, walking directly into his side, the man hadn't moved an inch. In his left hand, the stranger held a massive, elaborately decorated strawberry and whipped cream crepe. Oh dear, the blue-skinned man said, his voice incredibly smooth, melodic, and entirely unbothered. He looked down at the crepe, examining it with critical intensity. A near catastrophe. If this Haryuku special had fallen to the pavement, I might have had to rewind time a few minutes just to save it. And Beerus hates when I do that for snacks. Izuku blinked, his brain desperately trying to categorize the man's appearance and quirk. Mutation type? The blue skin and hair suggest a permanent physiological alteration. But the floating ring. Is that part of his body or a support item? And what did he say about rewinding time? A temporal quirk? Izuku's hand twitched toward his fallen notebook. I really am sorry, sir. I should have been watching my step. The stranger finally looked down at Izuku. His eyes were a startling violet, deep and ancient, yet sparkling with childlike amusement. He took a delicate, deliberate bite of the crepe. His eyes widened, and he let out a dramatic, euphoric sigh, a slight blush dusting his blue cheeks. Magnificent, the man whispered, seemingly forgetting Izuku was even there. The texture of the dough, the tartness of the berry, the rich, dairy sweetness. Earth truly is a culinary marvel in every universe. Every universe? Izuku frowned, thoroughly confused. Sir? The man swallowed and offered Izuku a bright, genial smile. No harm done, little mortal. Though, you seem to be carrying quite a heavy burden on your shoulders for someone so young. You are walking like a man with a mountain strapped to his back. Izuku froze. The casual observation pierced straight through his defenses. It's just been a long day at school. Hero training. Hero training? The man raised a white eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Fascinating. A world where mortals dress up in costumes to police one another. I suppose that is less messy than letting a god of destruction handle the planetary balance, though certainly less efficient. Izuku stared blankly. God of destruction? Is this guy a Chunibu? A villain? No, he doesn't have any malicious intent. He's just eating a crepe. I'm Izuku Midoriya, Izuku offered, picking up his notebook and bowing slightly. A pleasure to meet you, Izuku Midoriya. You may call me Whis, the man replied, taking another joyful bite of his dessert. I am merely a tourist passing through this dimension. Lord Beerus is taking a nap, and I heard rumors from a Supreme Kai about the desserts in this specific sector of the multiverse. I must say, the rumors were understated. Before Izuku could process the absolute absurdity of Wiss's words, the ambient noise of the street was shattered by a sound that made Izuku's blood run cold. Bang! Bang! Gunshots. The casual hum of the commercial district instantly dissolved into sheer panic. Civilians screamed, scattering like frightened birds. Izuku spun around, his instincts screaming at him to act, his brain immediately shifting into overdrive. 50 yards away, bursting out of the shattered glass doors of a high-end jewelry boutique, was a towering man. He was heavily mutated, his skin covered in thick, metallic scales. His right arm was transformed into a massive, multi-barreled cannon, still smoking from the warning shots he had just fired into the air. He was clutching a heavy canvas bag in his left hand. Out of the way! The villain roared, his voice distorted and metallic. Anyone moves, and I'll turn you into Swiss cheese. My quirk fires armor-piercing shrapnel at Mach 2. Try me. Izuku's breathing hitched. Mach 2. That's roughly 700 meters per second. The street is crowded. If he fires indiscriminately, the casualty rate will be catastrophic. I need to close the distance. 50 yards. At 8% of full calling, it will take me exactly 1.2 seconds to reach him. But if I launch off this pavement, I'll crack the concrete and create a shockwave that might trip the civilians running away. I need to find an elevated trajectory. The lamppost. No, it's too far to the left. If I jump, move, kid! A terrified salaryman shoved past Izuku, breaking his line of sight. Wait, Izuku's brain scrambled. Recalculate. The civilian blocked my path. If I activate my quirk now, the lightning might arc and shock him. I have to wait for a clear opening. I said move. The villain screamed, panicked by the flashing lights of a police cruiser turning the corner. He leveled his cannon arm directly down the street. Directly at the retreating crowd. Directly at Izuku and the strange blue man beside him. Time seemed to slow down for Izuku. He saw the villain's muscles tense. He saw the subtle glow of heat building in the barrels of the man's arm. He's going to fire. Izuku commanded his legs to move, desperately trying to force the one-for-all energy to channel. But his mind was so bogged down with variables, the civilians, the collateral damage, the speed of the projectile, that his body was locked in a horrific stasis. The delay. The fatal delay Aizawa had warned him about. The villain fired. A deafening boom echoed down the street. A hail of metallic shrapnel, glowing red-hot with kinetic energy, tore through the air faster than the speed of sound, aimed directly at the center of the crowd. Izuku couldn't even raise his arms in time. He just stared at the incoming death. My, a calm, melodic voice murmured right beside Izuku's ear. How terribly rude. What happened next was something Izuku Midoriya would never, for the rest of his life, be able to fully comprehend. Whis did not tense his muscles. He did not shift into a martial arts stance. He did not glow with a visible aura of power, nor did he yell out the name of a special move. He did absolutely nothing that indicated he was preparing for combat. In fact, Whis looked profoundly bored. The cloud of supersonic shrapnel reached them. Whis took a step forward. It was a casual step, the kind of step one takes when strolling through a garden. But as he moved, his body seemed to blur, leaving a faint, shimmering afterimage in his wake. The shrapnel, traveling at Mach 2, struck the space where Whis had been a millisecond before. Whis shifted his head a fraction of an inch to the left. A jagged piece of hot metal flew past his ear, close enough to singe a normal man's hair, but it touched nothing. He twisted his torso, a fluid, liquid motion that defied the rigid mechanics of anatomy. 3 more projectiles whistled through the negative space between his arm and his ribs. He didn't just dodge the shrapnel. He moved through it, like a ghost dancing in a rainstorm. Izuku watched, his mouth hanging agape, his analytical mind completely short-circuiting. What is this? He isn't anticipating the bullets. He's not looking at them. His eyes are closed. How is he doing this? Whis continued his casual stroll forward, passing right by the paralyzed Izuku. The hailstorm of metal continued to rain down, but Whis simply flowed around every single piece. A step backward, a slight pivot of the hip, a gentle tilt of the chin. It was a masterpiece of evasion, entirely devoid of wasted energy, devoid of tension, devoid of thought. And through it all, Whis held his crepe perfectly upright, not a single drop of whipped cream disturbed. He closed the 50-yard distance in what felt like a sigh. The villain stopped firing, his eyes bulging in utter terror, as the tall blue man suddenly appeared directly in front of him. What the hell are you? The villain screamed, raising his cannon point blank at Whis's face. Whis opened his eyes, taking a final, delighted bite of the crepe and swallowing. I am just a tourist. But you are interrupting my dessert. With a movement so fast and delicate it barely registered on the visible spectrum, Whis raised his right hand. He didn't punch. He didn't use a quirk. He simply extended 2 fingers and flicked the villain squarely in the center of the forehead. Thwack. The sound was sharp, like a snapping twig. The massive, heavily armored villain's eyes rolled back into his head. The kinetic force of the flick sent a shockwave rippling through his metallic scales, shattering his armor instantly. The villain folded backward, lifted entirely off his feet, and crashed into the pavement, completely unconscious before he even hit the ground. Silence descended upon the street, broken only by the distant wail of the approaching police sirens. Whis dusted off his hands, though they weren't dirty, and sighed, looking at the stump of his finished crepe. Shame. I could have eaten at least 3 more of those. Izuku was frozen. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His notebook had slipped from his fingers and fallen to the ground again. His mind, the supercomputer that analyzed every quirk, every hero, and every battle, was completely blank. It had crashed. He slowly walked forward, his legs shaking, until he stood beside the unconscious villain and the blue-skinned man. What? Izuku croaked, his voice raw. What was that? Whis turned, looking down at the green-haired boy with mild curiosity. What was what? That? What you just did? Izuku practically shouted, his hands trembling as he pointed to the defeated villain. I couldn't even track your movements. Your reaction time to those supersonic projectiles was less than 0. What is your quirk? Is it vector manipulation? Do you alter the probability of objects striking you? Do you have an automatic repulsion field? Izuku's muttering habit returned with a vengeance. He began to pace, his eyes wide, his hands frantically gesturing. No, wait, I saw you physically move your body. It wasn't a field. But you didn't look at the projectiles. You didn't have time to process their trajectory. So it must be precognition. You saw the future. You knew exactly where the bullets would be, so you moved to where they wouldn't be. Whis watched the boy's frantic display, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He let out a soft, melodious chuckle that stopped Izuku in his tracks. You truly are a fascinating little creature, Izuku Midoriya, Whis said gently. He tapped the bottom of his staff against the pavement. But you are entirely wrong. I have no quirk. I do not manipulate vectors, nor do I see the future. Then how? Izuku pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. How did you move like that? Whis leaned down, bringing his face closer to Izuku's. The violet eyes were no longer just amused. They were ancient, fathomless, and terrifyingly clear. I did not move, Whis said softly. My body moved on its own. Izuku frowned, his brow furrowing. I don't understand. Of course you don't. You are plagued by the same affliction that plagues almost all mortal fighters, Whis explained, standing up straight and looking up at the evening sky. You command your body with your mind. You perceive an attack, your brain processes the danger, it calculates a response, and then it sends a signal through your nervous system to your muscles to execute a dodge or a strike. Izuku nodded slowly. Yes. That's how anatomy works. That's how fighting works. It is how mortal fighting works, Whis corrected, his tone taking on the cadence of a patient teacher. But it is flawed. The process of thinking takes time. It is a tiny fraction of a second, yes, but against a truly fast opponent, that fraction of a second is the difference between life and death. Whis tapped the side of his own head with a long, elegant finger. Your thoughts are too loud, Izuku Midoriya. I could hear them screaming before that brute even fired his weapon. You were worrying about the civilians, your environment, your own power. Your mind is a raging storm of calculations and anxieties. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. It was exactly what Aizawa had said. It was exactly what Mirio had said. To fight perfectly, Whis continued, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, tranquil register, one must separate the mind from the body. You must stop commanding your limbs and allow them to think for themselves. Every arm, every leg, every cell must be free to react independently to danger, without waiting for the brain's permission. But how is that possible? Izuku whispered. If I don't think, I have no control. If I don't think, my power will destroy me. Ah, Whis smiled knowingly. You believe your mind is your greatest weapon. But in truth, it is your heaviest chain. True speed, true power, can only be achieved when you let go of your conscious thought entirely. You must find the absolute tranquility at the core of your being. A state of pure, unadulterated instinct. Whis paused, looking at the boy's scarred hands, sensing the terrifying, stockpiled energy resting dormant within the child. It was a crude, volatile power, like a raging bonfire. It is called ultra instinct, Whis said quietly. And it is a state that even the gods struggle to attain. Izuku stood completely still. The police cars had finally arrived, their sirens blaring, officers rushing out to secure the scene. The world around him was chaotic, loud, and blindingly bright, but in Izuku's mind, for the very first time in his life, there was silence. The calculations stopped. The anxieties vanished. He was entirely captivated by the profound, impossible truth this stranger had just presented to him. Ultra instinct. Can you? Izuku swallowed hard, his fists clenching at his sides. He looked up at Whis, his emerald eyes burning with a desperate, unyielding resolve. Can you teach me? Whis looked at the boy. He saw the sheer force of will, the desperate hunger to protect others, and beneath all that chaotic mortal noise, a spirit that was pure. Whis brought a hand to his chin, tapping it thoughtfully. I am on vacation. And I am strictly forbidden from interfering in the development of mortals, especially in universes outside my jurisdiction. Izuku's face fell. However, Whis smiled, his eyes twinkling. I did hear rumors about a dish called katsudon. I am told it is quite exceptional. Izuku's head snapped up. My mom makes the best katsudon in the entire prefecture. I'll buy you as much as you can eat. I'll buy out the best restaurant in Tokyo. Anything. Whis chuckled, a light, airy sound that seemed to chase away the tension in the air. A tempting offer, young hero. Very well. I have a free weekend before Lord Barris awakens. 2 days. That is all I can spare. I cannot promise you will learn it. In fact, I am almost certain you won't. But I can show you the door. Izuku bowed so fast he nearly snapped his own neck, his voice trembling with gratitude and a renewed, terrifying hope. Thank you, Whis-sensei. I promise I won't let you down. Whis smiled, turning away as the police officers approached them with notepads in hand. We shall see, Izuku Midoriya, Whis murmured to himself. We shall see if you can quiet the storm. The aroma in the tiny, unassuming restaurant was intoxicating. It was a rich, heavy blend of simmering dashi, sweet mirin, deeply savory soy sauce, and the unmistakable, mouth-watering scent of freshly fried pork cutlet. Izuku Midoriya sat rigidly in the corner booth of Kikuya, a small, family-owned diner nestled deep in the winding back streets of Mizurufu. It wasn't a Michelin-starred establishment. The vinyl seats were cracked and taped, the menus were slightly sticky, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a low, persistent buzz. But Izuku knew for a fact, having researched the culinary preferences of several pro-heroes for an essay on optimal caloric intake, that Kikuya served the undisputed best katsudon in the prefecture. Sitting across from him, looking utterly ridiculous in the cramped, humble booth, was Whis. The tall, blue-skinned entity had to hunch forward slightly to avoid scraping his gravity-defying white hair against the hanging paper lanterns. His staff rested casually against the wall, the black orb pulsing with a faint, imperceptible light that the tired waitress thankfully hadn't noticed. Between them sat a massive, steaming bowl. A perfectly fried pork cutlet, encased in golden brown panko breadcrumbs, rested atop a mountain of fluffy white rice. It was smothered in a silken blanket of soft scrambled eggs and sweet caramelized onions, garnished with a sprinkle of vibrant green scallions. Whis stared at the bowl. He hadn't moved for a full minute. Whis-sensei? Izuku ventured, his voice barely above a whisper. He was nervously wringing a paper napkin under the table. Is it to your liking? If it's not, we can go somewhere else. There's a high-end place in Roppongi, but it takes 3 months to get a reservation. But maybe if I use my provisional hero license I can. Whis raised a single, elegant finger, instantly silencing the boy. Slowly, reverently, Whis picked up the wooden chopsticks. He parted the egg and pork, ensuring he had a perfect ratio of meat, rice, and broth. He lifted the morsel to his mouth, closed his violet eyes, and took a bite. Izuku held his breath. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, a vibrant, glowing pink aura erupted around Whis. His eyes shot open, sparkling with literal stars. A look of profound, transcendent ecstasy washed over his blue features. Oh my heavens, Whis breathed, his voice trembling with emotion. He placed a hand over his cheek, swaying slightly in his seat. The crunch of the breading, it remains perfectly crisp despite the moisture of the broth. And the pork. It dissolves. It simply dissolves into a symphony of umami and sweetness. The egg acts as a velvet bridge, marrying the aggressive savory notes with the gentle embrace of the rice. Whis rapidly shoveled 3 more bites into his mouth, making highly ungodlike noises of delight. Beerus is a fool. A complete and utter fool for sleeping through this. I shall not tell him. I shall keep this universe's coordinates a secret from myself. Izuku let out a long, shuddering sigh of relief, slumping back into the vinyl seat. So, we have a deal? Whis swallowed, dabbing his mouth daintily with a napkin. He looked at Izuku, his expression shifting from culinary euphoria back to ancient, placid calm. We have a deal, Izuku Midoriya. I promise you 1 weekend. From sunset tonight until sunset on Sunday. 48 hours. Whis tapped his chopsticks against the edge of the empty bowl, clearing every last grain of rice. But I must warn you, little hero. What you are asking to learn is not a technique. It is not a quirk. It is not something you can write in that little notebook of yours and memorize. It is a fundamental rewiring of your existence. Izuku sat up straight, his emerald eyes burning with determination. I'm ready. I have to be. My quirk, it's a borrowed power. It's too big for me right now. Every time I use it, I have to calculate 100 different variables just to make sure I don't blow my own arms off. If I can learn to move without thinking, if I can learn this ultra instinct. Izuku clenched his scarred right fist, staring at the jagged, discolored lines of his skin. Then maybe I can finally stop being a liability to myself and actually save people the way All Might does, with a smile. Without hesitation, Whis observed the boy. He saw the scars. He felt the chaotic, stockpiled energy roiling beneath the boy's skin, a power passed down, heavy with the echoes of previous souls. It was a fascinating, albeit crude, anomaly. But Whis also saw the boy's mind. It was a labyrinth of anxieties, calculations, and self-doubt. Very well, Whis said, standing up. Go home. Inform your guardian that you will be partaking in a private, highly secluded training exercise. Pack nothing but comfortable clothes. No technology, and absolutely no notebooks. Izuku nodded, scrambling out of the booth. Where are we meeting? Should I take the train to Mount Fuji? Or maybe the training grounds at Ue? Whis chuckled. Leave the transportation to me. I shall collect you from your domicile in 1 hour. Do not be late. An hour later, Izuku stood in the courtyard of the Ue Heights Alliance dormitories, clad in his green pea tracksuit. He had lied to Aizawa, claiming All Might had arranged a last-minute, off-the-grid endurance camp for him. Aizawa had simply grunted and told him not to break any bones. At exactly 7 p.m., a beam of multicolored light struck the courtyard in absolute silence. When the light faded, Whis stood there, looking completely out of place amidst the modern brick and glass of the UA dorms. Prompt, Whis noted with an approving nod. Hold on to my shoulder. Izuku hesitantly reached out, his hand gripping the soft maroon fabric of Whis's tunic. Are we warping? Something like that, Whis said. He tapped his staff against the ground twice. The world did not blur. It simply ceased to exist. Izuku felt a sensation of unfathomable speed, though there was no wind, no sound, no friction. It was as if the universe itself was being pulled past them like a sheet of silk. His brain scrambled to calculate the g-forces, the trajectory, the physics of their movement, but before his synapses could even fire, it was over. Izuku stumbled forward, his boots sinking into soft, mossy earth. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the profound darkness. The air was crisp, cool, and carried the scent of ancient pine and damp soil. As his vision cleared, he realized they were standing in the heart of an old-growth forest. Towering trees, thicker than the UA dorms, spiraled upward, their canopies so dense they blotted out the moon, leaving only fractured slivers of silver light piercing the gloom. There was no sound of traffic. No distant sirens. Just the rustle of leaves, the chirp of crickets, and the rhythmic, deep hum of nature. Where are we? Izuku whispered, feeling an instinctual need to keep his voice down. A protected reserve in the northern mountains, Whis replied, casually floating a few inches off the ground, his staff emitting a soft, pale light. A place untouched by your modern society. Out here, there are no villains. There are no civilians to protect. There is no collateral damage to worry about. There is only you, me, and the space between us. Izuku nodded, immediately shifting his footing. He widened his stance, his muscles tensing. He began to run a diagnostic on his environment. The ground is soft, poor for traction. I'll need to channel one for all into my calves to compensate for the lost kinetic energy when I push off. The trees are obstacles, but also potential ricochet points. The lighting is incredibly low, so I'll need to rely on auditory cues. Stop, Whis commanded softly. Izuku froze. Sir? Whis floated closer, extending a hand. The notebook, Izuku. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. His hand instinctively flew to the zipper of his tracksuit pocket. But, you said not to pack it. I just brought it out of habit. I won't use it, I promise. I just feel better having it on me. The notebook, Whis repeated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. With trembling fingers, Izuku unzipped his pocket and pulled out Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 15. It was his lifeline. It contained his strategies, his observations, his meticulously crafted formulas for utilizing one for all without shattering his limbs. Handing it over felt like handing over a piece of his brain. Whis took the notebook. With a flick of his wrist, the book vanished into a pocket dimension. Now, Whis said, floating back a few paces. The rules of this weekend are simple. Rule number 1, you are forbidden from activating your quirk. Izuku gasped. What? But, Whis-sensei, without one for all, I'm just a normal kid. I can't move fast enough to dodge anything. The whole point is to learn how to use my power without overthinking it. The point, Whis corrected sharply, is to learn how to let your body move. Your quirk is a crutch. You rely on its overwhelming speed to compensate for your mind's delay. We are not here to train your quirk. We are here to train your cells. If you cannot master your own mortal flesh, you will never master the energy inside it. Izuku swallowed his protests, nodding slowly. Okay. No quirk. Rule number 2, Whis continued. He reached into his robes and pulled out a thick, black strip of cloth. You will not use your eyes. Before Izuku could react, Whis moved. It wasn't speed, it was simply displacement. Whis was suddenly behind Izuku, tying the cloth tightly over the boy's eyes. Total, suffocating darkness descended on Izuku. Panic flared in Izuku's chest. I can't see. I don't have my quirk. I'm in a forest I don't know against an opponent who can bend space and time. Whis-sensei, thwack. A sharp, stinging pain exploded across the back of Izuku's head. He yelped, stumbling forward and clutching his skull. Ow! What was that? That was a hollow bamboo reed. Whis's voice floated from somewhere to Izuku's left. I tapped you. Barely. But I wasn't ready. A villain will not wait for you to complete your mental checklist, Izuku, Whis said, his voice now coming from the right. Now. Dodge. Izuku gritted his teeth. He dropped into a defensive crouch, raising his fists. He couldn't see, so he had to use his other senses. He strained his ears, listening for the rustle of the leaves. He felt the subtle shifts in the air currents. Okay, focus. Whis is floating, so there are no footsteps. But he still displaces air when he moves. The bamboo reed will create a distinct whistling sound due to the hollow chamber cutting through the wind resistance. If I can isolate that frequency. Thwack. Pain flared on his left shoulder. Izuku spun, throwing a blind hook, but his fist met empty air. Too slow, Whis chimed from directly behind him. Thwack. Right ribcage. Izuku hissed, sweeping his leg backward in a wide arc. Nothing. He's moving in a triangular pattern. Izuku's mind raced, his brain burning calories as it tried to construct a geometric map of the clearing. He hit my head, then my left shoulder, then my right rib. If he continues this pattern, the next strike will be my left knee. Izuku waited for the absolute perfect millisecond, anticipating the strike to his leg. He prepared to jump. Thwack. The bamboo struck him squarely on the tip of his nose. Gah! Izuku stumbled backward, his eyes watering beneath the blindfold. I thought you were going for my knee. Why would you think that? Whis asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. Because of the pattern. It was a descending, alternating tactical assault. A heavy, disappointed sigh echoed through the trees. Izuku, there was no pattern, Whis explained patiently. I simply struck where you were open. You constructed a narrative in your mind, committed your body to that false narrative, and blinded yourself to reality. You are fighting a phantom of your own creation. Then how am I supposed to know where you're going to hit me? Izuku cried out in frustration. You aren't supposed to know, Whis replied. You are supposed to feel it. Stop predicting. Stop analyzing. Just be. I don't know how to do that. Then we have a very long night ahead of us. The next 4 hours were a physical and psychological torment unlike anything Izuku had ever experienced. Even under Aizawa's brutal erasure drills or Gran Torino's frantic bouncing around the apartment, Izuku always had a goal. He always had a puzzle to solve. He could deduce Gran Torino's trajectory by watching where his boots aimed. He could counter Aizawa by breaking line of sight. But with Whis, there was no puzzle. Because Whis wasn't trying to outsmart him. Whis was simply existing, moving with a fluidity that had no intent, no malice, and no telegraphing. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The bamboo reed struck Izuku's arms, his back, his legs, his stomach. By midnight, Izuku was covered in a mosaic of stinging welts. He was panting heavily, his tracksuit soaked in sweat. The physical exertion of constantly dodging shadows was exhausting, but the mental exhaustion was far worse. Izuku's brain was a screaming engine that refused to turn off. I heard the leaves crunch. He touched the ground. Dodge left, thwack. He dodged right into the stick. The air pressure shifted. It's an overhead strike. Block high, thwack. A poke to the stomach. I can't hear anything. He's standing still, waiting for me to attack, thwack. A tap on the back of the neck. Stop. Izuku finally gasped, ripping the blindfold off his face. He fell to his knees, his chest heaving, tears of sheer frustration prickling the corners of his eyes. The forest clearing was silent. Whis stood 10 feet away, holding a slender piece of bamboo. He didn't look tired. He didn't even look like he had been moving. I can't, Izuku choked out, slamming a fist into the mossy ground. I can't turn it off. My brain won't shut up. Every time you move, a million thoughts run through my head. I have to analyze. If I don't, I'm nothing. I'm just a quirkless Deku. Whis floated closer, his expression softening. He knelt gracefully, his robes pooling on the damp earth. He placed the bamboo stick down. Why do you hold on to your thoughts so tightly, Izuku? Whis asked quietly. What are you so afraid of letting go of? Izuku stared at the dirt, his breathing ragged. The question pierced through the layers of tactical defense straight into his core. Because if I don't think... Izuku swallowed the lump in his throat. If I don't calculate everything perfectly, people get hurt. I get hurt. This power I was given, it broke my arms, it shattered my legs. For the first year I had it, every time I threw a punch, I was maiming myself. The pain was blinding. The only way I learned to survive my own body was to lock it behind a wall of math and analysis. Izuku looked up, his green eyes reflecting the faint, ethereal light of Whis' staff. I have to think, Whis-sensei. Because if I make a mistake, if I let my guard down for 1 second, I'll lose it all. I'll let All Might down. I'll let the world down. My mind is the only thing keeping me in control. Whis listened in silence. He looked at the boy, a teenager carrying the weight of a planetary symbol of peace on his fractured shoulders. It was a terribly heavy burden for a mortal. I see, Whis said softly. You view your mind as a cage. You keep your power locked inside it, releasing it only in measured, calculated increments, terrified of the beast within. Whis reached out and gently tapped Izuku's chest, right over his heart. But power, true power, is not a beast to be caged. And your body is not a fragile vessel meant to be piloted by a terrified mind. Your body is a marvel, Izuku. It possesses an innate wisdom far older and far faster than your conscious thoughts. Whis stood up, gesturing to the towering trees around them. Look at this forest. Do the trees calculate the angle of the sun to perform photosynthesis? Does the river chart its course through the stones? No. They simply exist in a state of perfect flow. They act according to their nature, without hesitation. Whis turned back to Izuku. You have trained your mind to be a general, commanding your muscles like foot soldiers. But a general sits in a tent, far from the battlefield. By the time his orders reach the front lines, the battle has shifted. You must dissolve the chain of command. How? Izuku pleaded, his voice cracking. How do I dissolve it? By trusting yourself, Whis replied. Not your quirk. Not your calculations. Your physical self. When an attack comes, do not ask your brain what to do. Let the cells of your skin, the fibers of your muscles, feel the danger and move away from it. It is a terrifying thing, to relinquish control. It feels like stepping off a cliff in the dark, but you must trust that your body will find the ground. Whis materialized a small, elegant teapot and 2 porcelain cups out of thin air. He poured a steaming, fragrant green tea and handed a cup to the battered boy. Drink. Rest. Tomorrow, we will try again. The sun crested the horizon, filtering pale morning light through the dense canopy. Day 2 was infinitely worse. Izuku's muscles were stiff from the previous night's beating. Every welt throbbed in time with his heartbeat. But the physical pain was secondary to the agonizing mental gymnastics he was putting himself through. He was trying so hard to not try. He stood in the center of the clearing, the blindfold back over his eyes. Okay, Izuku thought. Clear your mind. No thoughts. Just instinct. Empty, empty, empty. Wait, if I'm thinking about being empty, I'm still thinking. Damn it. Okay, focus on the breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Let the body move on its own. If the stick comes from the left, let the shoulder dip. But wait, if I plan to dip the shoulder, that's premeditation. That's a thought. Stop planning, thwack. Gah! Izuku stumbled as the bamboo struck his ribs. You are louder today than you were yesterday, Whis noted dryly, swirling his staff. Your mind is practically screaming at itself to be quiet. It is like trying to smooth the ripples in a pond by slapping the water. Slapping the water. Izuku analyzed the metaphor. Right. The more force I apply to my own mental state, the more turbulent it becomes. I have to just let the water settle on its own. But how long does water take to settle? Gravity, surface tension. No! Stop doing physics, thwack. Hours bled into the afternoon. Izuku was pushed to the absolute brink of his endurance. He was exhausted, dehydrated, and covered in bruises. He had failed thousands of times. Every single time Whis swung the stick, Izuku's brain intercepted the sensory data, processed it, and delayed his physical reaction. It was a fatal flaw woven into his very DNA. He was Izuku Midoriya. The boy who watched heroes and wrote notes. The boy who broke his bones and learned to measure his power in percentages. His intellect was his superpower before he ever ate a hair. Asking him not to think was like asking him not to breathe. By late afternoon, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, menacing shadows across the forest floor. The 48 hours were almost up. Izuku stood swaying on his feet, his breathing ragged and shallow. The blindfold felt heavy with sweat. He was so tired he could barely hold his arms up. The relentless barrage of failures had finally stripped away his frantic energy. He was too exhausted to calculate. He was too drained to analyze. His mind was running out of fuel. Your time is almost up, Izuku, Whis's voice echoed through the trees. It sounded distant, almost detached. Izuku didn't respond. He didn't have the energy to form a coherent sentence. He just stood there, swaying gently like a reed in the wind. I failed, a small, quiet voice whispered in his mind. I can't do it. I'm too flawed. For the first time all weekend, Izuku stopped fighting the silence. He stopped trying to force his mind to be empty. He simply let the despair wash over him, accepting defeat. He let go of his desire to be the perfect vessel for one for all. He let go of his fear of the bamboo stick. He just stopped. The forest grew incredibly quiet. The humming of his anxious thoughts slowly faded into the background, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat, the rustle of the leaves, the cool touch of the evening breeze against his bruised skin. He wasn't thinking about Whis. He wasn't thinking about dodging. From 30 feet away, Whis observed the boy. He noticed a sudden, profound shift in Izuku's aura. The chaotic, spiking energy of the mortal mind had suddenly smoothed out. It wasn't perfect, but for a microsecond, the pond was still. Whis smiled. Without a sound, without a shift in air pressure, Whis crossed the 30 feet instantly. He swung the bamboo stick in a vicious, horizontal arc aimed directly at the side of Izuku's head. It was much faster than any strike he had thrown all weekend. Izuku didn't think. He didn't hear the stick. He didn't calculate the trajectory, but his body felt the encroaching threat. Before the bamboo could make contact, Izuku's knees buckled slightly. It wasn't a conscious dodge. His body simply collapsed beneath the arc of the strike. The bamboo whistled through the empty air where his head had been a millimeter prior. Simultaneously, as if driven by a separate intelligence, Izuku's right arm snapped upward, his hand clamping shut around empty air. Smack! Izuku's eyes shot open beneath the blindfold. He was holding something. Slowly, shakily, Izuku pulled the blindfold down. He was entirely crouched, leaning backward at an awkward, impossible angle. And his right hand was gripping the very tip of Whis's bamboo stick, stopping it mere inches from his temple. Izuku stared at his own hand in sheer, unadulterated shock. I caught it. His brain rebooted, violently roaring back to life. I caught it! I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I didn't even know he was attacking. My center of gravity shifted on its own, utilizing a subconscious muscular contraction to lower my hurtbox, while my right arm acted on autonomic reflex to intercept the kinetic force. I did it. I achieved a state of, and you lost it, Whis sighed, abruptly letting go of the bamboo stick. Izuku blinked, his mind flooding with adrenaline and excitement. But I caught it. Did you see that, Whis-sensei? I didn't think. I just moved. I felt exactly what you were talking about. The cells reacting, the disconnect from the nervous system. Yes, Whis said, his tone carrying a mix of approval and deep amusement. You achieved a microsecond of purity. Your body acted autonomously. But the moment you realized what you had done, your ego rushed back in to claim the victory. Your mind immediately began to analyze your success, thus destroying the very state that caused it. Izuku's excited grin faltered. Oh. So, because I realized I did it, I stopped doing it. Precisely. The paradox of ultra instinct, Whis nodded, tapping his staff against the ground. The surrounding forest faded away, replaced in an instant by the familiar brick courtyard of the Yue Heights Alliance. The warm, orange glow of the sunset bathed the dorms. It was Sunday evening. The 48 hours were up. Izuku looked around, the sudden transition jarring him. He looked down at the bamboo stick still clutched in his hand. He was covered in bruises, his muscles screaming in agony, utterly exhausted. He had gained 0 new quirks. He hadn't improved his percentage of 1 for all. He hadn't learned a new super move to show off to Bakugo or Todoroki. I failed, Izuku murmured, looking at his scarred hands. Did you? Whis asked gently, hovering a few inches off the pavement. You came to me holding a heavy, locked door, demanding I give you the key. I told you there is no key. The door must simply be removed. You did not remove the door this weekend, Izuku Midoriya. But for one fleeting second, Whis smiled, a genuinely warm expression. You turned the handle. Izuku looked up, his chest tightening with a profound sense of awe. The path to Ultra Instinct is not walked in a weekend, Whis said, his form beginning to shimmer with multicolored light as he prepared to depart. Gods of destruction spend millions of years trying to grasp what you touched for a millisecond. You have the hardest hurdle to overcome, for your mind is your greatest strength and your most dangerous flaw. Whis raised 2 fingers in a casual salute. Stop analyzing the world, little hero. Let the world analyze you. May we meet again. And tell your mother the Katsudon was divine. With a silent flash of light, Whis was gone, leaving nothing but the cool evening breeze in his wake. Izuku stood alone in the courtyard. The ambient noises of the dorms drifted over to him, Mina's laughter, the clatter of plates from the kitchen, the distant explosion of one of Bakugo's outbursts. Normally, his brain would instantly map these sounds, analyzing who was where and what they were doing. But as Izuku looked down at his bruised arms, and then up at the darkening sky, he took a deep, shuddering breath. He closed his eyes. He didn't think about tomorrow's classes. He didn't think about One for All. He didn't think about villains, or heroes, or calculations. For the first time in a very long time, Izuku Midoriya just listened to the wind. Izuku Midoriya awoke to a symphony of pain. It wasn't the deep, bone-grinding agony he was accustomed to after overusing One for All. That pain was a sharp, burning reminder of his own fragility, a shattered glass sensation that radiated from the marrow outward. No, this pain was different. It was entirely superficial, yet entirely absolute. Every square inch of his skin, from his calves to the nape of his neck, felt as though it had been repeatedly kissed by a hornet. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open to the familiar, dim light of his dorm room's ceiling. The All Might posters staring down at him seemed excessively bright this morning. Slowly, with the agonizing caution of an old man, Izuku peeled the blankets off his body and swung his legs over the edge of the bed. His feet hit the floor, and a phantom thwack echoed in his mind, causing him to flinch. His right shoulder seized up in protest. He looked down at his arms. They were mottled with a tapestry of purple, blue, and yellow bruises, perfectly cylindrical in shape. The hollow bamboo reed wielded by Whis had left a geographical map of Izuku's failures all over his body. I need to ice these. Izuku's brain immediately booted up, the familiar engine of his intellect turning over. If I apply a cold compress to the trapezius and deltoids for 20 minutes, I can reduce the localized swelling. Then I should follow up with a topical anti-inflammatory. I wonder if Recovery Girl's stamina-draining kiss would be inefficient for surface-level contusions. The cellular division required might cost more energy than... Izuku stopped. He froze, sitting on the edge of his bed. He squeezed his eyes shut and took a deep, trembling breath. Stop slapping the water, he told himself. He imagined the pond Wiz had spoken of. He imagined the turbulent waves of his own thoughts, the frantic splashing of his anxieties. Slowly, he envisioned himself taking his hands out of the water. He let the mental silence wash over him, forcing his analytical mind into a box and closing the lid. He didn't analyze the bruises. He simply felt them. They hurt. That was all. There was no need to solve the pain right now. There was just the pain, the cool morning air of the dorm room, and the sound of birds chirping outside his window. For a few minutes he just sat there, existing. It was incredibly difficult. Every few seconds a stray thought would pop up. What time is it? Did I do the English homework? Will Aizawa-sensei make us spar today? And Izuku would have to consciously bat it away, returning to the silence. It was exhausting. Maintaining no mind while safely alone in his room was already taking a toll on his concentration. Doing it in the middle of a high-stakes battle seemed mathematically impossible. No math, he chided himself. He stood up, dressed in his UE uniform, and grabbed his yellow backpack. He paused by his desk, his hand hovering over a fresh, blank notebook he had pulled from his reserve stash. His fingers twitched. He wanted to write down what happened this weekend. He wanted to document Wiz's strange martial arts philosophy, chart out the micro-movements of the blue-skinned deity, and formulate a training regimen. The notebook is a crutch. Wiz's melodic, detached voice echoed in his memory. Izuku slowly pulled his hand back. He left the notebook on the desk. Grabbing his bag, he walked out the door. The common area of the Heights Alliance was a bustling hub of morning chaos. Kaminari was frantically trying to toast bread while simultaneously charging his phone with his quirk, resulting in a slightly burnt smell filling the air. Mina and Siro were arguing over possession of the television remote, while Ida chopped the air with stiff, robotic hands, lecturing them on the virtues of sharing and proper morning decorum. Usually, Izuku would walk into this environment and immediately absorb it. He would mentally map the room, note everyone's moods, perhaps mutter a few theories about Kaminari's wattage output affecting the toaster's internal coils. Today, he just walked straight through to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and sat at the island counter. Deku-kun! A cheerful voice called out. Achiko Uraraka bounded over, her cheeks slightly flushed from the morning rush. She took the seat next to him, beaming. Good morning! How was the secret endurance camp with All Might? You look... Oh my gosh, Deku, you look terrible! Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of deep concern as she took in the dark bags under his eyes and the visible purple bruising peeking out from his collar. Tenya Ida, abandoning his scolding of Kaminari, marched over with heavy, purposeful steps. Midoriya! Uraraka is correct. Your physical state is deeply alarming. Did All Might subject you to unauthorized subterranean combat scenarios again? As the class representative, I must insist you visit Recovery Girl immediately. I'm fine, guys, Izuku said. His voice was softer than usual, lacking its typical nervous, energetic bounce. He stared down at his glass of water, watching the subtle ripples on the surface. It was just a very different kind of training. No broken bones. Just some bruises. Different how? Shoto Todoroki asked, seemingly materializing from nowhere to stand on Izuku's other side, a half-eaten bowl of cold soba in his hands. Todoroki's mismatched eyes were intensely observant. Izuku opened his mouth to explain. He wanted to tell them about the blue man who loved Katsudon. He wanted to explain the concept of severing the mind from the body, but as he tried to formulate the words, he realized how absurd it all sounded. I spent the weekend getting hit with a stick blindfolded so I could learn to stop thinking. It was philosophical, Izuku finally managed, offering a tired, subdued smile. A lot of meditation. Trying to clear my head. Katsuki Bakugo stomped into the kitchen, violently yanking open the refrigerator door. Meditation? Sounds like an excuse for being weak, you damn nerd. Bakugo pulled out a carton of milk, slamming the fridge shut. He turned, his crimson eyes locking onto Izuku. Bakugo expected the usual reaction, Izuku flinching, raising his hands defensively, and stammering out an apology, or a frantic explanation. But Izuku didn't do any of that. He didn't even look at Bakugo. He just kept looking at the water in his glass, breathing slowly, evenly. He was trying to maintain the stillness. He was treating Bakugo's aggressive energy not as a threat to be analyzed, but simply as a sound in the room, like the humming of the refrigerator. Bakugo's eyes narrowed dangerously. A vein popped on his forehead. Hey! I'm talking to you, Deku. I hear you, Kaken, Izuku said softly, still not looking up. His tone wasn't defiant. It wasn't scared. It was completely, maddeningly neutral. Bakugo let out a low growl, small explosions popping in his palms. What's with the attitude? You think a weekend trip makes you a Zen master now? You look down on me? No, Izuku replied simply. He took a sip of his water. The utter lack of a reaction seemed to short-circuit Bakugo's anger, replacing it with deep, simmering confusion. Even Todoroki raised a brow. Uraraka and Ida exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the Izuku they knew. The Izuku they knew was a bundle of raw nerves, passion, and endless commentary. This Izuku felt, hollowed out. Whatever, Bakugo scoffed, turning on his heel and stomping away. Keep acting like a weirdo. See if it saves you in the next combat drill. As the morning bell chimed in the distance, Izuku slowly stood up. He felt a profound sense of isolation. Whis was right. Letting go of his mind felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. Without his constant stream of analytical thoughts, Izuku felt like he was floating untethered in space. He wasn't sure who he was if he wasn't overthinking. Homeroom with Aizawa passed in a blur. Present mixed English class was an exercise in pure auditory endurance. Midnight's modern hero art history was usually a class Izuku loved, full of trivia and tactical breakdowns of Golden Age hero costumes. Throughout it all, Izuku sat near the back of the class, staring out the window. He wasn't entirely zoning out, he was actively practicing. He watched a single leaf detach from a cherry blossom tree outside the window. He followed its descent. He didn't calculate wind speed. He didn't predict where it would land. He just watched it fall, trying to mimic its lack of intention within his own mind. Just fall, he thought. No, don't tell yourself to fall. Just be. From the front of the room, Aizawa observed his problem student from beneath his capture weapon. Midoriya hadn't muttered a single word all day. His notebook, usually filling up at a frightening pace, was closed on his desk. The boy looked exhausted, but not the physical exhaustion typical of his quirk overuse. It was a deep, spiritual fatigue. Did All Might push him too hard? Aizawa wondered. No. Yagi said he didn't even see the kid this weekend. Midoriya lied to me about his whereabouts. Whatever he did, it's messed with his head. Midoriya, Aizawa called out, his dry voice cutting through the classroom chatter. Izuku blinked, his gaze slowly shifting from the window to his teacher. Yes, Aizawa-sensei? You're awfully quiet today. And your notebook is closed. Care to share your analysis on the tactical disadvantages of the Crimson Riot's original costume design? Or are you just going to stare at the foliage all day? The class turned to look at him. Usually, a prompt like this would result in a 5-minute, stuttering, highly detailed tangent from Izuku. Izuku looked down at his desk. I don't have an analysis today, sensei. A collective murmur swept through Class 1A. Midoriya without an analysis? Jiro whispered to Yaoyorozu. Did the world end? Perhaps he is ill, Yaoyorozu murmured back, her brow furrowed. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. No analysis. Right. See me after class, Midoriya? When the lunch bell rang, the class dispersed quickly, leaving Izuku standing awkwardly in front of Aizawa's podium. The tired underground hero leaned back, pulling out a jelly pouch and unscrewing the cap. Talk, Aizawa demanded. Izuku shifted on his feet. I'm just tired, sensei. Don't lie to me, kid. You lied about being with All Might this weekend. Now you're acting like someone erased your personality. You haven't taken a single note. You're walking around like a ghost. Did you get into a fight? Did a villain corner you? No, Izuku said quickly, shaking his head. No villains. I promise. Then what is it? And what are all those perfectly round bruises on your arms? Izuku looked at his forearms. He knew he couldn't explain Whis. Aizawa would think he was hallucinating or had been hit by a mind-altering quirk. I met a martial artist, Izuku said slowly, choosing his words carefully. He told me that my biggest weakness is my mind. He said I think too much, that my brain is acting as a bottleneck for my physical reactions. So, I'm trying to practice clearing my head. Not thinking. Aizawa stopped drinking from his jelly pouch. He stared at Izuku for a long, quiet moment. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Then, to Izuku's shock, Aizawa let out a short, dry huff of amusement. A martial artist, huh? Aizawa muttered, capping the pouch. Well, whoever he is, he's a lot more perceptive than you are. Izuku blinked. You agree with him? I've been telling you for months that you telegraph your moves, Midoriya. You broadcast your intentions louder than present mic on a megaphone. You calculate everything. It makes you slow, and worse, it makes you predictable. If someone finally pounded that lesson into your thick skull, then good. Aizawa leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto Izuku's. But there is a difference between clearing your mind and lobotomizing yourself. You're trying so hard to not think that you're just replacing one distraction with another. If you're focusing on being empty, you're not empty. Izuku's breath hitched. It was exactly what Wes had said. Like slapping the water to calm the ripples. Go eat lunch. Aizawa dismissed him with a wave of his hand. And Midoriya? Stop trying to force it. True instinct isn't a switch you flip. It's what happens when you have absolutely no other choice. The UA cafeteria, affectionately known as the domain of Lunch Rush, was a massive, cavernous space designed to accommodate hundreds of superpowered teenagers simultaneously. The ceiling was a high arch of reinforced glass and steel, letting in beams of natural sunlight. Today, the cafeteria was packed. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of laughter, clinking silverware, and the occasional minor explosion or quirk misfire. Izuku sat with Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and Tsuyu. He picked mechanically at his rice, chewing slowly. So, I was thinking, Uraraka said, trying to inject some life into the table's atmosphere, maybe we could all go to the mall this weekend? We haven't had a real break since the provisional license exam. It might be good to just unwind. An excellent proposition. Ida agreed enthusiastically. Proper rest is vital to the development of a hero's stamina. We must meticulously plan a schedule to maximize our leisure time efficiently. I'd be down, Tsuyu added, rib biting softly. What do you think, Midoriya? Izuku blinked, looking up from his rice. He had been completely zoned out, listening to the hum of the ventilation system. Oh. Yes. The mall sounds nice. Todoroki set his chopsticks down. Midoriya. If you are injured, or if something is bothering you, you can tell us. We are your friends. Izuku felt a pang of guilt. He hated making them worry. He forced a smile, channeling his old self as best he could. Really, guys, I'm okay. Just trying out a new mental training exercise. It's taking a lot out of me, but I think it will help me control one for all better. Uraraka sighed, though she smiled slightly. Just don't push yourself too hard, okay? You always take the weight of the world on your shoulders. I won't, Izuku promised, finally taking a proper bite of his lunch. 2 tables over, Bakugo sat with Kirishima, Kaminari, and Ishido. Bakugo wasn't eating. He was glaring daggers at the side of Izuku's head. Dude, you're gonna melt a hole in Midoriya's skull if you keep staring like that, Kirishima pointed out around a mouthful of meat. Shut up, shitty hair, Bakugo growled, not looking away. Something is wrong with him. Yeah, he's been super quiet all day, Kaminari agreed. Normally he'd be muttering about how Lunch Rush optimizes his workflow or something. Think he's depressed? He's not depressed, Bakugo snapped, his fists clenching on the table. He's hiding something. Again. Every time the nerd gets that blank, stupid look on his face, it means he's figured out some new way to piss me off. Above them, on the 3rd floor observation catwalk that overlooked the cafeteria, a group of 3rd-year support course students were transporting a massive, experimental piece of machinery. It was an oversized, industrial-grade repulsor engine designed to simulate gravitational anomalies for high-end rescue training. It weighed approximately 4 tons and was strapped to a heavy-duty hovercart. Careful with the localized stabilizers, Hatsum. A third year yelled over the din of the cafeteria below. If the gyroscopes misalign, the anti-grav field will invert. May Hatsum, tinkering with a wrench near the back of the cart, gave a thumbs up. Relax, senpai. My babies are perfectly calibrated. Just give it a little more juice. She cranked a wrench on the main coupling. A sharp, metallic snap echoed on the catwalk, instantly followed by the high-pitched, terrifying whine of a failing turbine. Sparks showered from the repulsor engine. The hover cart violently jerked to the left, slamming into the safety railing of the catwalk. The railing, designed to hold human weight, immediately groaned and buckled under the 4-ton impact. Shut it off! The third year screamed, diving out of the way. It was too late. The gyroscopes inverted. Instead of pushing against gravity, the massive engine pulled gravity toward itself, magnifying its own weight tenfold. The catwalk steel supports sheared off with a deafening screech of tearing metal. Down in the cafeteria, the noise of the student body ceased instantly. Hundreds of heads whipped upward. Izuka looked up. Time seemed to dilate, stretching into a painful, agonizing slow-motion crawl. Directly above the center aisle of the cafeteria, the main thoroughfare where dozens of students were currently waiting in line for food, the catwalk gave way. A massive, 4-ton hunk of dense machinery, accompanied by twisted steel girders and hundreds of jagged shards of tempered safety glass from the observation deck, began to freefall. Panic erupted. Students screamed, scattering in every direction. Quirk activations flashed across the room as older students tried to erect barriers or catch the falling debris, but the sheer, magnified weight of the inverted repulsor engine was tearing through their defenses like tissue paper. Izuka's brain, suppressing itself all day, violently snapped back to its default state. The analytical supercomputer roared to life, flooded with adrenaline. Threat level catastrophic. Mass, estimated 4 tons, multiplying due to active QuirkTech failure. Trajectory, center aisle, directly above the first-year general education students. Action required, intercept and destroy the debris before impact. Izuku stood up from his table, emerald lightning beginning to spark around his clenched fists. Calculation: if I jump using 15% of one for all, I can reach the engine in 0.8 seconds. If I execute a 20% smash, I can shatter the machine. But wait! His eyes darted to the environment. If I shatter a 4-ton machine in midair, the shrapnel will become supersonic projectiles. The cafeteria is enclosed. The blast radius of a 20% smash will blow out the remaining windows and likely concuss everyone within a 50-meter radius. I can't smash it. I have to catch it. But if I catch it, the kinetic energy transferred through my legs will shatter the floor, plunging us into the basement levels. He was paralyzed. The variables were too numerous, the collateral damage too high. Every solution generated by his mind created a new, equally deadly problem. Move! His brain screamed at his body. Think of something. Calculate a safer angle. Use Blackwhip to catch the glass? No, not fast enough to deploy an area of effect web. He was standing perfectly still, his body locked in the agonizing fraction of a second of delay that Whis and Aizawa had warned him about. The general education students in the aisle below were frozen in terror, raising their arms futilely against the falling shadow of death. I'm too slow. My thoughts are too slow. Then, amidst the roaring panic, the screaming, and the screeching metal, Izuka heard it. He didn't hear it with his ears. He felt it in his chest. Stop analyzing the world. Let the world analyze you. A phantom sensation of a hollow bamboo reed tapping against his collarbone. A vision of Whis, completely relaxed, walking through a hail of supersonic shrapnel with his eyes closed. When an attack comes, do not ask your brain what to do. In that infinitesimal sliver of a second, as the 4-ton engine fell within 20 feet of the students' heads, the roaring engine of Izuka Midoriya's mind simply shut off. He let go. He didn't make a conscious decision to stop thinking. The sheer, overwhelming pressure of the impending tragedy broke the cage of his intellect. The math stopped. The anxiety evaporated. The frantic need to be the perfect hero vanished. The emerald lightning of One for All, usually violent and crackling, instantly died out. To the rest of the cafeteria, what happened next was a blur. But to Bakugo, who had his eyes locked onto Izuku the entire time, it was the most jarring, unnatural thing he had ever witnessed. Izuku didn't jump. He didn't tense his legs. He didn't yell smash. He simply disappeared from the table. There was no boom of displaced air. There was no crater cracked into the floorboards where he had stood. He was just gone. A heartbeat later, the massive repulsor engine slammed into the cafeteria floor. The impact sounded like a bomb going off. The floor cracked, dust billowing outward in a massive cloud. Shards of glass rained down like daggers, embedding themselves into the tables and the floor. Silence fell over the room, heavy and terrifying. "Oh my God," Uraraka whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Is everyone okay?" Ida yelled, waving his arms to disperse the dust cloud. "Did anyone get caught beneath it?" The dust slowly began to settle. The massive steel engine sat embedded a foot deep into the cracked tiles of the center aisle. Twisted steel beams lay strewn around it, and standing perfectly still in the negative space between the massive engine and a shattered steel girder, completely untouched, was Izuku Midoriya. In his arms, he held two terrified general education students, a boy and a girl. Izuku was breathing slowly, evenly. His eyes were wide, but they were unfocused, staring straight ahead into the settling dust. A faint, almost imperceptible wave of heat seemed to radiate from his skin, distorting the air around him for just a second before vanishing. He hadn't smashed the engine. He hadn't caught it. He had simply walked into the impact zone, slipped through the falling rain of glass and steel like water flowing through rocks, grabbed the two students, and stepped into the exact pocket of empty space where the debris wouldn't crush them. He had done it in less than a tenth of a second. "Midoriya!" Kirishima yelled, scrambling over a broken table. "Holy crap, man! That was insane! I didn't even see you move! Did you use your super speed?" Todoroki walked up, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the ground where Izuku was standing. He looked back at the table where Izuku had been sitting just seconds prior. "There's no scorch mark," Todoroki observed quietly. "No cracked tiles from where he pushed off. He moved without any initial kinetic buildup." Izuku slowly set the two trembling students down. Are you two hurt?" His voice was barely a whisper. "And no," the boy stammered, looking at Izuku as if he were a god. You grabbed us. I didn't even see you coming. 1 second the machine was above me, the next, we were over here." Thank you so much." The cafeteria erupted into cheers and sighs of relief. Teachers began rushing into the room, Snipe and Hound Dog leading the charge to secure the area and assess the damage. But Izuku didn't hear the cheers. He didn't notice the teachers. He looked down at his own hands. They weren't broken. They weren't glowing with one for all. They weren't even trembling. "I didn't think," Izuku realized, a profound sense of shock rippling through his core. He replayed the last 3 seconds in his head. There was a complete void where his tactical planning usually sat. He hadn't calculated the trajectory of the falling glass. He hadn't measured the distance to the students. He hadn't channeled a specific percentage of his quirk. His body had simply perceived the absolute necessity of saving them, recognized that conscious thought was too slow, and bypassed his brain entirely. It had moved on its own. It was exactly what Wes had described. It was a terrifying, beautiful lack of control. "Hey! Deku!" Izuku slowly turned his head. Bakugo was standing a few feet away, entirely ignoring the chaos and the teachers. The blond boy's posture was rigid, his crimson eyes wide with a mixture of shock, fury, and a deep, unsettling realization. Bakugo had spent his entire life analyzing Izuku. He knew every twitch, every mutter, every telegraph of Izuku's movements. He knew exactly how One for All looked and sounded when it activated. "What the hell was that?" Bakugo demanded, his voice dangerously low, almost a hiss. "Kakanai." Izuku started, but the words failed him. He didn't have an explanation that Bakugo would accept. "You didn't use your quirk," Bakugo stated, stepping closer. He wasn't yelling, which made it infinitely more terrifying. There was no green lightning. "You didn't break the floor when you jumped, and you didn't brace for the impact when you stopped." Bakugo pointed a trembling finger at the twisted steel girder that had buried itself into the floor just 3 inches from Izuku's shoulder. You didn't even look up at the debris, Deku. You dodged that beam without looking at it. You didn't plan that. Izuku swallowed hard, his throat dry. I don't know what I did, Kaken. Bullshit, Bakugo snarled, grabbing the collar of Izuku's uniform. You're hiding something again. Some new trick you learned behind my back. Just like when you suddenly got a quirk out of nowhere. What is it? Are you mocking me? Bakugo. Let him go. Snipe's voice boomed across the cafeteria. The pro-hero marched over, adjusting his mask. Midoriya just saved 2 students' lives. Now isn't the time for your temper tantrums. Everyone, evacuate the cafeteria immediately. We need to ensure the structural integrity of the rest of the ceiling. Bakugo held onto Izuku's collar for one more tense second, his eyes searching Izuku's face for a lie, for the familiar look of nervous calculation. He found nothing. Izuku's eyes were entirely calm, still reflecting the remnants of that eerie, silent void. With a scoff of disgust, Bakugo shoved Izuku backward and turned away, stalking out of the cafeteria with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Izuku stood amidst the wreckage, the dust slowly settling on his shoulders. Uraraka and Ida rushed over to him, checking him for injuries, their voices a blur of concerned questions. Izuku nodded mechanically, answering them with generic reassurances. But internally, his mind was entirely focused on the sensation he had just experienced. It wasn't a mastery. It wasn't even close to what Whis could do. Whis lived in that state perpetually. Izuku had merely been forced into it by the sheer terror of imminent death, a survival instinct overriding his analytical paralysis. A spark, Izuku thought, looking down at his scarred palms. It was just a spark in the dark, but it was real. Whis hadn't been lying. The philosophy of nothingness wasn't just a metaphor, it was a physical state of being. And for a fraction of a second, Izuku Midoriya had stepped through the door. Now, the truly terrifying question loomed over him. How was he ever going to learn to do it on purpose? Because as his heart rate began to settle, and the adrenaline faded, his mind violently rushed back in to fill the void. A million thoughts, calculations, and anxieties flooded his brain all at once, giving him a sudden, blinding headache. He clutched his forehead, wincing. If I try to do it, I'm thinking about doing it. And if I think about doing it, I can't do it. It was a paradox. A maddening, impossible puzzle. But as Izuku looked at the 2 students he had saved, a deep, unshakable resolve settled in his chest. He would figure it out. He had to, because the silence he had felt in that fraction of a second was the most beautiful, liberating feeling in the world. He was going to learn how to quiet the storm.